The summer sun painted golden streaks across the perfectly manicured lawns of Oak Ridge Heights, one of the most prestigious neighborhoods in the city. Among these beautiful homes stood a uniquely designed modern house belonging to one of the city's most respected families. Inside, a bright and determined 12-year-old girl was busy in the kitchen, carefully measuring ingredients while her dad watched proudly from the doorway. The secret's in the fresh lemons, just like Grandma always said. The girl smiled, squeezing another bright yellow lemon into her glass pitcher. Her small hands worked with surprising precision, adding just the right amount of sugar and a pinch of her special ingredient, a touch of mint that made her recipe unique. Her father, a distinguished-looking man in his mid-40s, couldn't help but beam with pride. As one of the city's most prominent civil rights attorneys who had recently been appointed as a federal judge, he had always taught his daughter about the importance of doing things the right way. "Remember what we talked about?" he asked, adjusting his reading glasses. "Yes, Dad," she replied enthusiastically, pulling out a folder from her backpack. "I've got all the permits right here. We got them yesterday from City Hall, and I even made copies." She held up the documents with pride, showing organization skills well beyond her years. The young girl wasn't just any kid trying to make pocket money. She was an honor roll student who had come up with the idea of a lemonade stand to raise money for her school's outdated computer lab. What had started as a simple conversation during a school council meeting had turned into a full-fledged mission for her. "You know, when I was your age, I never would have thought about getting permits for a lemonade stand," her father chuckled, remembering his own childhood adventures. "But times have changed, and I'm proud of you for doing this properly." The girl nodded seriously, though her eyes sparkled with excitement. "I want to show everyone that kids can be professional too. Plus, the computer lab really needs those new computers. Mrs. Rodriguez says some of them still run on Windows XP." Her father laughed at that, remembering his own experiences with outdated technology. "Well, you've certainly done your homework. The business plan you showed me last night was impressive. I especially liked your marketing strategy." Indeed, the young entrepreneur had thought of everything. She had designed bright, eye-catching posters, calculated her costs and potential profits, and even created a social media campaign with help from her older cousin. Her plan was to document the journey of raising money for the school, hoping to inspire other kids to take initiative in their communities. As she finished preparing her second batch of lemonade, her father helped her pack everything into their family's electric car. They had bought all new supplies: a professional-looking stand, clear glass dispensers, eco-friendly cups, and even a small card reader for people who preferred not to carry cash. "Remember," her father said as they unloaded everything onto their front lawn, "if anyone gives you any trouble, I'll be right inside working on my cases." "But you've got all your paperwork, and you're on our private property. You have every right to be here." Little did they know that this simple summer project would soon become the catalyst for exposing deep-rooted issues in their community. As the young girl set up her stand, arranging everything just so, neither she nor her father could have predicted how their ordinary Saturday morning would unfold, or how their family would soon be thrust into the center of a controversy that would shake their city to its core. The neighbors were already starting to notice the activity. Mrs. Chen from next door waved enthusiastically as she tended to her prized roses, and Mr. Patel from across the street was walking over with his two young sons, all of them curious about the new neighborhood business. The atmosphere was cheerful and supportive, exactly what you'd expect in a close-knit community. The girl's stand looked absolutely professional. She had chosen a clean, modern design with a white and yellow color scheme. A chalkboard menu displayed her prices and proudly announced that all proceeds would go to her school's computer lab fund. She even had a small tip jar with a picture of the current computer lab, showing the ancient machines they were hoping to replace. Several early customers praised her initiative and business sense. A jogger stopped by, impressed by the card reader option. A couple walking their golden retriever loved the eco-friendly cups. Everyone who tasted the lemonade agreed it was the perfect balance of sweet and tart, with that subtle hint of mint making it special. As the morning progressed, word began to spread about the remarkable young girl with the gourmet lemonade stand. She kept detailed records of every sale in a small notebook, something her father had suggested would be good practice for understanding business basics. Her customers weren't just buying lemonade, they were investing in a young person's dream to make a difference in her community. What made this scene even more special was how it brought together people from all walks of life. The mail carrier took a break from their route to enjoy a cold glass. A group of high school students filming a project for their YouTube channel stopped to interview her about youth entrepreneurship. Even the local newspaper photographer, who happened to be passing by, took a few shots for their community section. But as the clock approached noon and business was booming, none of them could have anticipated the dark cloud that was about to cast its shadow over this picture-perfect scene. In a police station across town, a phone call was about to set in motion a chain of events that would test not just a family's resolve, but an entire community's sense of justice and equality. The midday sun beat down on Oak Ridge Heights as the young girl's lemonade stand continued to draw a steady stream of customers. By now, she had already sold through her second batch of lemonade and was preparing her third, carefully following her grandmother's cherished recipe. The growing success of her small business venture had attracted more than just neighborhood residents. People from nearby streets had started showing up after hearing about the amazing lemonade through social media and word of mouth. A local food blogger had stopped by earlier, captivated by the young entrepreneur's story. She took pictures of the professional setup and interviewed the girl about her mission to upgrade the school's computer lab. The blogger was particularly impressed by the detailed business plan and proper permits carefully displayed in a clear folder on the corner of the stand. "You know, I've reviewed restaurants all over the city," the blogger had said, taking another sip of lemonade, "but this might be the most professional operation I've seen in a while. And this mint twist? Absolutely genius." The girl beamed with pride as she handled each transaction with care, making sure to thank every customer and provide them with a small card that detailed her fundraising goals. She had even created a QR code that linked to her school's website, where people could learn more about the computer lab project. An elderly couple who had been watching from their porch for the past hour finally made their way over. The woman, using her floral print cane for support, smiled warmly. "My dear, watching you reminds me of myself when I was young," she said, her eyes twinkling. "Back then, we didn't have all these fancy card readers and permits, but that entrepreneurial spirit, that's timeless." Her husband nodded in agreement while pulling out his wallet. "We'll take 2 glasses, and here's a little extra for your computer lab fund," he said, placing a $20 bill in the tip jar. "Our grandchildren go to your school too, and goodness knows they need those new computers." The growing success of the stand had created a lovely community atmosphere. People weren't just buying lemonade, they were staying to chat, sharing stories, and connecting with neighbors they might have only waved to in passing before. A group of kids from the next block over had set up a small table nearby where they were selling homemade bracelets inspired by the young girl's initiative. The girl's father occasionally peeked out from his home office window, proud to see his daughter handling everything so professionally. He had raised her to believe in herself and to understand that with proper preparation and hard work, she could achieve anything she set her mind to. Today was proving that lesson in action. Around 1 p.m., a young mother with twins stopped by. While her children enjoyed their lemonade, she shared that she was a teacher at another school in the district. "We need more students like you," she said warmly. "Someone who sees a problem and takes initiative to fix it. Have you thought about speaking to other classes about your experience?" The girl hadn't considered this possibility, but her eyes lit up at the idea. She grabbed her notebook, the one where she had been tracking sales, and jotted down the teacher's suggestion. Perhaps this lemonade stand could grow into something even bigger than she had imagined. The local ice cream truck driver, who regularly patrolled the neighborhood, stopped by and bought a glass. "Smart business move setting up on such a hot day," he said with a knowing wink. "You might end up being my competition." His friendly joke made everyone around the stand laugh. A couple of off-duty firefighters, still in their department t-shirts, walked up next. They had heard about the stand from their colleague who lived in the neighborhood. "This is exactly the kind of community involvement we love to see," one of them said, leaving an extra tip. "Keep up the great work." As the afternoon wore on, the girl had to call her father to help her refill the ice chest for the 3rd time. The success was beyond anything she had expected. She had already surpassed her initial fundraising goal for the day, and it wasn't even 2 p.m. yet. Some of her regular customers had started returning for seconds and thirds. The mail carrier was back, this time with a few of their colleagues who had heard about the best lemonade in the city over their radio system. The girl's efficient service and consistently delicious product were earning her quite a reputation. But just as the day seemed to be going perfectly, a shadow fell across the cheerful scene. A sleek police cruiser rolled slowly down the street, its tinted windows reflecting the afternoon sun. The car moved with deliberate slowness, like a shark circling its prey. Inside sat Police Chief Thompson, a man who had recently transferred from a smaller district and was known for his zero-tolerance approach to what he called unauthorized business activities. The chief had received a call about an illegal vendor in Oak Ridge Heights. Despite having more pressing matters at the station, something about this call had caught his attention. Perhaps it was the location. This prestigious neighborhood wasn't his usual jurisdiction for such matters. Or perhaps it was something else entirely, something that spoke to his deep-seated prejudices that he kept carefully hidden behind his badge. As he approached the scene, he could see the crowd gathered around the lemonade stand. From his perspective, this wasn't a heartwarming community gathering. It was an unauthorized business operation that needed to be shut down. The fact that it was run by a young girl didn't matter to him. Rules were rules, or at least, that's what he told himself as he pulled his car to a stop. The atmosphere around the stand shifted subtly as people noticed the police cruiser. The elderly couple exchanged worried glances. The firefighters straightened their postures, recognizing the chief's vehicle. The young mother pulled her twins closer. What happened next would shake the community to its core and expose deep-rooted issues that had been simmering beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect neighborhood. But for now, the girl continued serving her customers, blissfully unaware that her simple lemonade stand was about to become the catalyst for a controversy that would make headlines across the country. Police Chief Thompson sat in his cruiser for a few long moments, observing the scene through his tinted windows. He watched as people gathered around the lemonade stand, their laughter and cheerful conversation carrying across the perfectly manicured lawn. His jaw tightened as he noticed the crowd's diversity. This wasn't how he remembered Oak Ridge Heights from his patrol days 20 years ago. The call had come in just as he was about to head home for the day. Unauthorized vendor in Oak Ridge Heights, the dispatcher had said. Normally, he would have assigned this to a patrol officer, but something about the location made him take personal interest. This was the kind of neighborhood where order needed to be maintained, or so he believed. As he stepped out of his vehicle, the summer heat hit him immediately. He adjusted his badge, making sure it caught the sunlight, a habit he'd developed over his 25 years in law enforcement. The weight of his authority was something he enjoyed reminding people about, especially in situations like this. The off-duty firefighters noticed him first. Their relaxed postures stiffened as they recognized the chief's trademark scowl. They had worked with him before and knew his reputation for being unnecessarily harsh with minor infractions. One of them discreetly pulled out his phone and began recording, a habit many first responders had developed in recent years. The young food blogger, who had returned for a second glass of lemonade, also reached for her camera. Something about the chief's deliberate stride toward the stand made her journalist instincts tingle. The elderly couple watching from their porch exchanged knowing looks. They'd seen this kind of scene play out before, though usually not in their own neighborhood. What do we have here? Chief Thompson's voice cut through the cheerful atmosphere like a cold wind. He stood with his thumbs hooked in his belt, legs spread in what he considered an authoritative stance. The young girl behind the stand looked up at him with a mixture of confusion and concern. "Good afternoon, sir." She greeted him brightly, her customer service smile still in place. "Would you like to try some lemonade? All proceeds go to our school's computer lab fund." The chief's expression didn't soften at her friendly welcome. "Do you have a permit for this operation?" he demanded, his voice carrying that particular tone some authority figures use when they've already decided someone is in the wrong. "Yes, sir." The girl reached for her folder of documents, maintained as meticulously as any professional business. "My dad helped me get everything in order. We have all the proper permits right here." But before she could show him the paperwork, the chief cut her off. "Do you realize it's illegal to operate an unauthorized business in this neighborhood?" His voice grew louder, drawing more attention from passers-by. Several phones were now recording the interaction. The young mother with twins stepped forward, her protective instincts kicking in. "Officer, she just said she has permits. Maybe you should look at them before." "Ma'am, please step back." "This is a police matter," Thompson interrupted, his hand instinctively moving to rest on his belt. The crowd tensed at this gesture, though the chief seemed oblivious to their reaction. The girl's confident smile had faded, replaced by a look of worry. She tried again, her voice smaller now. "Sir, everything is in order. We spent all day at City Hall yesterday getting the proper permissions. You can call them to verify." "Listen here." The chief leaned forward over the stand, his shadow falling across the girl's face. "I've been dealing with unauthorized vendors for longer than you've been alive. Pack this up now, or I'll have to take official action." The crowd's murmurs grew louder. The firefighters had moved closer, their phones still recording. The elderly couple had made their way down from their porch, the woman's floral cane tapping against the sidewalk with determined clicks. "This is ridiculous," the food blogger said loudly, her camera capturing every moment. "She's a child raising money for her school." Chief Thompson turned toward the crowd, his face reddening. "Anyone interfering with police business will be cited for obstruction." His hand was still resting on his belt, though now it had shifted closer to his radio. Inside the house, the girl's father had been watching the situation unfold through his office window. As a federal judge, he had seen enough to know when a situation was about to escalate unnecessarily. He set down the case files he'd been reviewing and stood up from his desk. The young girl, trying to hold back tears, began putting her supplies away. The lemonade she'd so carefully prepared splashed inside the pitchers as her hands trembled. The tip jar, full of donations for the computer lab, rattled against the table. "That's right," the chief said, watching her pack up. "And don't let me catch you out here again without proper." "Is there a problem here, Chief Thompson?" A deep, authoritative voice cut through the tension. Everyone turned to see a tall, distinguished-looking man standing in the doorway of the house. He wore a casual weekend outfit, but his bearing suggested someone used to commanding respect in much more formal settings. The crowd parted as the girl's father walked toward the stand. Several neighbors who recognized him began whispering to those who didn't. The chief's expression flickered as he noticed the change in the atmosphere, though he couldn't quite place why. What happened next would become one of the most talked-about incidents in Oak Ridge Heights history, a moment that would force their community to confront uncomfortable truths about power, prejudice, and justice. The scene was set for a confrontation that would change not just their neighborhood, but the entire city's approach to community policing. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife as the girl's father approached the lemonade stand. His footsteps on the manicured lawn seemed to echo in the sudden silence that had fallen over the crowd. Even the birds seemed to have stopped chirping, as if nature itself was holding its breath. "I asked if there was a problem, Chief Thompson," the father repeated, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable weight of authority. He moved to stand beside his daughter, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. The girl had stopped packing up her stand, her hands still trembling slightly as she held a half-empty pitcher of lemonade. The chief straightened his posture, trying to maintain his commanding presence. "This is a police matter, sir. We've received complaints about an unauthorized vendor operating without proper permits." "Interesting," the father interrupted, reaching for the folder his daughter had tried to show earlier. "Because I personally accompanied my daughter to City Hall yesterday, where we spent 3 hours ensuring everything was in perfect order." He opened the folder and began laying out documents one by one on the stand's counter. "Perhaps you'd like to review them." The chief's face twitched slightly as he glanced at the permits. They were indeed official, stamped and signed by the city clerk herself. But he wasn't ready to back down just yet. "Well, there are still regulations about health and safety." "You mean like these?" The father pulled out another set of documents. "Health Department certification for food handling, safety inspection certificate, even an insurance policy, which isn't required for a child's lemonade stand, but we obtained anyway. Would you like to see her food handler's certification card as well?" The crowd had grown larger now, with more neighbors emerging from their homes to witness the confrontation. Phones continued recording as the scene unfolded. The two off-duty firefighters exchanged knowing looks. They'd never seen the chief in quite this position before. "Sir," Chief Thompson started again, his voice losing some of its earlier swagger. "I'm just doing my job. When we receive complaints." "About that complaint," the father interjected, "I'd be very interested to know who complained about a child's properly permitted lemonade stand raising money for her school's computer lab. Would you be willing to share that information?" The chief shifted uncomfortably. "We protect the anonymity of our callers." "Of course you do," the father nodded. "Just as I'm sure you protect the anonymity of all callers equally, regardless of the neighborhood or the circumstances." He let that last word hang in the air meaningfully. The young food blogger had moved closer, her camera still rolling. The elderly couple with the floral cane stood their ground nearby, the woman's grip on her cane tightening as she watched. The mother with twins had positioned herself where her children could see while remaining safely back from the tension. "What exactly is your position at the moment, Chief Thompson?" the father asked, his voice taking on a tone familiar to anyone who'd ever been in his courtroom. "Are you suggesting that despite having all required permits and documentation, my daughter should not be allowed to operate her charitable business?" "I'd like to understand the legal basis for that decision." The chief's face had grown increasingly red. He glanced around, suddenly very aware of all the recording devices pointed in his direction. I was not aware of your position in the community, sir." "My position?" The father raised an eyebrow. "You mean as a concerned parent? Or perhaps you're referring to my position as a federal judge?" "Though I'm curious why either would affect how you enforce the law." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Several people whispered to their neighbors, explaining who the father was to those who didn't know. The chief's complexion shifted from red to pale as the full impact of his actions began to dawn on him. There seems to have been a misunderstanding," the chief stammered, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. "Of course, if all the permits are in order." "They are," the father confirmed. "Just as my daughter told you several times before you chose to intimidate her instead of simply reviewing her documentation." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I have to wonder, Chief Thompson, how many other children's lemonade stands you've personally shut down today? Or is there something specific about this stand that caught your attention?" The silence that followed was deafening. The chief opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. The young mother with twins shook her head disapprovingly. The food blogger's camera continued to record every uncomfortable moment. "I think," the father continued, "we should discuss this further at City Hall on Monday morning. I'm sure the mayor and the police commissioner would be interested in reviewing today's events. Don't you agree?" Chief Thompson's radio crackled to life, offering him a desperately needed escape route. I need to respond to another call," he said quickly, already backing away toward his cruiser. "Have a good day, Your Honor." As the chief retreated to his vehicle, the crowd burst into applause. The girl's father turned to her, his stern expression melting into one of pride and concern. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" She nodded, wiping away a tear that had escaped despite her best efforts to stay strong. The elderly woman with the floral cane approached, placing a gentle hand on the girl's arm. "You handled that beautifully, dear. Now, how about you sell me another glass of that wonderful lemonade?" The crowd quickly rallied around the stand. People who had been watching from a distance came forward to make purchases. The food blogger was already typing furiously on her phone, her post about the incident certain to go viral. The firefighters shared the video they'd recorded in their department group chat, knowing the story was far from over. As the afternoon sun continued its arc across the sky, the lemonade stand resumed its operations, now symbolizing something far more significant than a simple fundraiser. It had become a stark reminder that justice and equality still needed defending, even in the most unexpected places. By Sunday morning, the incident at the lemonade stand had spread across social media like wildfire. The food blogger's post had gone viral overnight, and the videos taken by various witnesses had been shared thousands of times. Local news stations had picked up the story, with headlines reading "Federal Judge Confronts Police Chief Over Daughter's Lemonade Stand" and "Questions of Bias Surface in Oak Ridge Heights." The girl's father sat at their kitchen table, scrolling through his phone while sipping his morning coffee. His daughter was still asleep upstairs, exhausted from the previous day's events. His own phone had been buzzing nonstop with messages from colleagues, friends, and reporters seeking comments about the incident. "Have you seen this?" his wife asked, showing him another news article on her tablet. She had been up half the night, alternating between concern for their daughter and anger at the situation. The police department issued a statement saying they're looking into the matter. Looking into what? Everything was caught on camera. Just then, their doorbell rang. Outside stood the elderly couple from next door, holding a fresh-baked pie. "We couldn't sleep last night," the woman said as they invited her in. "We kept thinking about what happened. The way that man treated your little girl. It reminded us too much of things we saw in our youth, things we hoped were long behind us." Her husband nodded solemnly. "We made some calls last night. Talked to some people we know on the city council. They're calling an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning." More neighbors began stopping by throughout the morning, each bringing food, support, and their own stories of encounters with Chief Thompson. The young mother with twins arrived with her husband, who turned out to be a civil rights attorney himself. "The police commissioner called me this morning," he shared. "They're launching a formal investigation into the chief's pattern of behavior." The food blogger's post had gained even more traction. National news networks were starting to pick up the story. Comments poured in from across the country, with many people sharing similar experiences in their own communities. The incident was quickly becoming a symbol of ongoing issues in law enforcement and community relations. Around noon, the girl finally came downstairs, still in her pajamas. She paused at the bottom of the stairs, surprised to see their living room full of people. The elderly woman immediately went to her, wrapping her in a warm hug. "There's our brave entrepreneur," she said softly. "How are you feeling today, dear?" The girl managed a small smile. "I was scared yesterday," she admitted, "but mostly I was confused. I knew we had all the right papers. I don't understand why he wouldn't even look at them." Her father exchanged glances with the other adults in the room. How do you explain deep-rooted prejudice to a child who sees the world with such innocent eyes? The off-duty firefighters who had witnessed the incident stopped by later, bringing news from their department. "The fire chief issued a statement supporting your family," one of them explained. "He's demanded a joint review of emergency response policies across all departments." As the day progressed, their phones kept buzzing with notifications. The videos had reached millions of views. Comment sections were filled with heated discussions about police reform, community relations, and the importance of standing up against abuse of power. Local business owners began calling, offering to match whatever funds the lemonade stand had raised for the school's computer lab. A major tech company's regional director reached out, expressing interest in donating a complete set of new computers to the school. The girl sat in their kitchen, watching all this unfold with a mixture of amazement and uncertainty. "Dad," she asked quietly during a rare moment alone, "did I do something wrong by setting up my stand?" Her father pulled her close. "No, sweetheart. You did everything exactly right. Sometimes in life, we encounter people who let their prejudices cloud their judgment. But what happened yesterday, it's going to help make things better. You've helped start an important conversation in our community." Late in the afternoon, the police commissioner herself arrived at their door. She was a no-nonsense woman who had fought her own battles rising through the ranks. "I wanted to come personally," she said, sitting down in their living room. "What happened yesterday was unacceptable. We're conducting a full review of Chief Thompson's record, and I promise you appropriate action will be taken." The local news crews had started gathering outside their house, hoping for interviews. The girl's father had declined them all, wanting to protect his daughter from more stress, but she surprised everyone by saying she wanted to speak. "If it helps other kids feel safer setting up lemonade stands," she said with determination, "then I want to tell my story." The day ended with an impromptu neighborhood gathering in their front yard, the same spot where the incident had occurred. Someone had brought speakers, playing soft music. Children ran around with glow sticks as the adults discussed plans for community action groups and police oversight committees. The girls' lemonade stand still stood in its spot, now decorated with flowers and supportive messages from neighbors. Tomorrow, it would become the backdrop for news reports across the country. But tonight, it stood as a symbol of something more, a community's resolve to stand together against injustice, and a reminder that even the smallest stand can become a platform for significant change. Monday morning arrived with a buzz of anticipation in the air. City Hall's steps were already crowded with reporters and community members by 7 a.m., hours before the emergency council meeting was set to begin. The story had exploded overnight, with national news networks setting up their equipment and satellite trucks lining the street. Inside City Hall's main chamber, every seat was filled. The girl's father sat in the front row, his legal notepad ready. His daughter had stayed home with her mother, both of them watching the live stream that had been set up for this special session. The elderly couple from next door sat beside him, the woman's floral cane propped against her chair. "All rise," called the council secretary as the mayor and city council members filed in. The police commissioner sat at a separate table, a thick folder of documents in front of her. Chief Thompson's chair remained conspicuously empty. He had called in sick that morning. The mayor, a usually cheerful man in his 60s, looked grave as he called the meeting to order. "We're here today to address a deeply troubling incident that occurred in our community this weekend," he began. "An incident that has forced us to confront uncomfortable truths about our city." The police commissioner stood up next, her voice steady as she presented her findings. "Upon review of body camera footage and witness videos, along with an examination of Chief Thompson's record, we've uncovered a disturbing pattern of behavior." She gestured to several screens around the room, which began displaying statistics and incident reports. In the past year alone, there have been 37 complaints about selective enforcement under Chief Thompson's leadership. 85% of these incidents involved minorities or young people. This is not a coincidence. This is not a misunderstanding. This is a systemic issue that demands immediate action. The food blogger, who had been invited to testify, shared her footage of the incident. The chamber fell silent as they watched the confrontation unfold again. Several council members shook their heads in disbelief as they saw how the chief had treated a young girl who had done everything by the book. One by one, community members stood up to share their stories. The young mother with twins spoke about previous encounters with the chief. A high school teacher described how his students felt targeted during their fundraising events. The off-duty firefighters testified about similar incidents they had witnessed. During a brief recess, the girl's father checked his phone. The school principal had messaged him. Students were holding a peaceful demonstration in support of their classmate. They had set up lemonade stands all over the schoolyard, each one displaying proper permits in clear folders, just like his daughter had done. When the session resumed, the police commissioner took the floor again. "Based on our investigation, I am recommending immediate suspension of Chief Thompson pending further review. Additionally, we propose a complete overhaul of our community policing policies." The mayor nodded gravely. "We're also implementing immediate changes to our law enforcement training programs. This incident has shown us that having rules and regulations isn't enough. We need to ensure they're enforced fairly and without bias." As the meeting continued, social media exploded with updates. The hashtag #LemonadaStandJustice was trending nationwide. Other cities began sharing their own stories of similar incidents, leading to calls for police reform across the country. Outside City Hall, a group of children had set up their own lemonade stands in solidarity. They had created a long line of stands stretching down the street, each one properly permitted and raising money for various school causes. The local news crews were interviewing them, capturing their hopeful spirits and determination to make a difference. Back inside, the council was voting on a series of emergency measures. They approved the creation of a civilian oversight committee, mandatory bias training for all law enforcement officers, and new guidelines for community engagement. The police commissioner announced plans for a youth advisory board to help bridge the gap between law enforcement and young people. The girl's father received another text, this time from a national civil rights organization. They wanted to feature his daughter's story in their upcoming campaign about community policing reform. They saw her experience as a perfect example of how standing up to injustice, even in small ways, could lead to meaningful change. Late in the afternoon, as the meeting was wrapping up, breaking news flashed across everyone's phones. Chief Thompson had submitted his resignation, effective immediately. The chamber erupted in murmurs and discussions. The mayor called for silence. "While this resignation is a significant step, it is only the beginning. The real work lies ahead of us. We must ensure that what happened this weekend never happens again, not to any child in our city." As people began filing out of City Hall, the elderly woman with the floral cane caught up with the girl's father. "You know," she said softly, "I've lived in this city for over 60 years. I've seen a lot of changes, good and bad. But what your daughter started, this feels different. This feels like real change." The father smiled, thinking of his daughter watching all of this from home. She had turned a simple lemonade stand into a catalyst for change, not through any grand plan or strategy, but simply by standing her ground and knowing her rights. Outside, the line of children's lemonade stands was still going strong. The young entrepreneurs had raised thousands of dollars for various school projects, but more importantly, they had shown that the next generation wasn't afraid to stand up for what's right. As the sun began to set behind City Hall, casting long shadows across the steps, reporters gathered for one final update. The police commissioner announced the interim chief, a well-respected officer known for her community outreach work, and outlined the next steps in their reform process. The girl's father headed home, knowing this was just the beginning. Tomorrow, there would be more meetings, more policy discussions, more steps toward real change. But tonight, he just wanted to hug his daughter and tell her how proud he was of her courage and resilience in the face of injustice. 6 months had passed since the lemonade stand incident, and Oak Ridge Heights had transformed in ways no one could have predicted. The little stand that started it all still sat in the girl's front yard, though now it was more of a symbol than a business. A small plaque had been installed beside it, commemorating the day that changed their community forever. On this particular Saturday morning, the neighborhood was buzzing with activity. The city was celebrating the opening of its new Youth Entrepreneurship Center, a direct result of the movements sparked by that fateful summer day. The center occupied a renovated building downtown, its fresh paint and modern design reflecting the new spirit of the community. The girl stood at the podium, her father beaming proudly from the front row. She had grown more confident over the past months, having found her voice as a young advocate for change. The crowd gathered for the opening ceremony included familiar faces, the elderly couple with the floral cane, the food blogger whose video had gone viral, the off-duty firefighters who had captured the crucial evidence, and the young mother with twins who had stood up to support her. "When I started my lemonade stand," she began, her voice clear and steady, "I just wanted to help my school get new computers. I never imagined it would lead to all of this." She gestured to the building behind her, its windows displaying colorful posters of young entrepreneurs at work. The past 6 months had brought remarkable changes to their city. The interim police chief had become permanent, implementing sweeping reforms in community policing. Every officer now underwent extensive training in youth engagement and bias prevention. The Civilian Oversight Committee, which included several teenagers, had become a model for other cities looking to improve their law enforcement practices. The school's computer lab, the original goal of the lemonade stand, had received more than just new computers. Tech companies from across the country had stepped forward, donating equipment and providing coding workshops for students. What started as a simple fundraiser had blossomed into a full-scale technology initiative that was changing students' lives. Former Chief Thompson's resignation had led to investigations in other districts where he had served, uncovering similar patterns of behavior. The story had sparked a national conversation about how law enforcement interacts with young people, especially those trying to engage in positive community activities. The girl's father had worked with legal experts to draft the Young Entrepreneurs' Rights Act, which was now making its way through the state legislature. The bill would protect children's right to engage in small business activities while ensuring proper safety and supervision guidelines. As the ceremony continued, the mayor stepped up to the podium. 6 months ago, we saw how one small stand could lead to big changes, he said, smiling at the young girl. Today, we're not just opening a building, we're opening doors of opportunity for all our young people. The Youth Entrepreneurship Center would provide resources, mentoring, and support for kids wanting to start their own small businesses. The first floor included a commercial kitchen where young food entrepreneurs could learn proper food handling and business practices. The second floor housed computer labs and meeting rooms where kids could develop their business plans and marketing strategies. Most importantly, the center would serve as a bridge between law enforcement and young people. Police officers would volunteer as mentors, helping kids understand their rights and responsibilities as young business owners. The goal was to build trust and understanding between the community and those sworn to protect it. The elderly woman with the floral cane had become a regular mentor at the center, sharing her decades of business experience with the next generation. You know, she told the girl after the ceremony, sometimes the best changes come from the most unexpected places. Who would have thought a glass of lemonade could change so many lives? Later that afternoon, kids from all over the city gathered at the center for its first youth business fair. Tables lined the main hall, displaying everything from homemade crafts to tech innovations. Every young entrepreneur had their permits properly displayed, a lesson learned from the incident that started it all. The former food blogger, now running a successful media company, had created a documentary about the lemonade stand incident and its aftermath. The film was being used in police academies across the country as part of their community relations training. As the day drew to a close, the girl and her father walked home together. The setting sun cast long shadows across their neighborhood, much like it had on that eventful day 6 months ago. But now, those shadows felt different. They were reminders of how far they'd come and how much they'd accomplished. They passed several kids running lemonade stands along the way, each one operating confidently under the new youth business guidelines. Officers on patrol stopped to buy drinks and chat with the young entrepreneurs, building the kind of positive relationships that had been missing before. Back at home, the girl's original lemonade stand stood as a testament to the power of standing up for what's right. She still operated it occasionally, though now it was more about keeping the spirit of change alive and raising money. Every glass of lemonade served was a reminder that even the smallest actions can lead to the biggest changes. That evening, as families gathered in their front yards enjoying the last warmth of the day, the sense of community was palpable. Children played freely, parents chatted with neighbors, and police officers walked their beats with a new understanding of their role in the community. The incident that could have divided them had instead brought them closer together, creating a model of positive change that would inspire communities for years to come.